Welcome back to the second hour of Nothing Personal. And we are delighted to welcome Boog Sciambi, the TV voice of the Chicago Cubs, one of my oldest, nearest, and dearest in my career in baseball. Welcome to the show, Boog. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you, David. What's happening?
I do appreciate that you're here and just calling you the TV voice of the Cubs. To me, you'll always be the voice that I associate with the Marlins with World Championships. But now that you're with the Cubs, I want to talk Cubs because we're seeing good Cubs pretty
Yeah.
much this entire year. And it started in the offseason with what many considered a strange and interesting, amazing trade getting Kyle Tucker. What's it been like having Kyle Tucker? Is he really the reason behind the resurgence and the phenomenal offense that the Cubs have?
I think it starts with Kyle Tucker because you're talking about one of the top seven-ish hitters in all of baseball, the ability to control the strike zone, the power. He doesn't strike out. And that is really where you stop, the sentence and reflect in terms of baseball in 2025. If you can get your hands on a guy or guys who slug with contact, who slug but don't strike out, it makes your offense really potent. And he's basically like Soto. So, not only that, but he steals bases. So to put, most nights the Cubs have the best hitter on the field. And so to put him in that lineup, and then I would say you need to have surprises, right? You need to have guys that um, kind of come out of nowhere. And whereas they thought Pete Crow-Armstrong would be a magnificent defender, he has been. I don't know that anybody saw the slug coming, and he's turned into, as good a center fielder as there is in baseball. He'll be the starting center fielder for the National League this year, and he deserves it. But he's clobbered right-handed pitching. So you add a guy, and then you almost, in Pete Crow-Armstrong, with the way he's played, it's like you're adding a totally different player. No one's plugging PCA in for, a 500 slugging percentage. So there's that. And then they've gotten an uptick in performance from Seiya Suzuki, and it's formed what is a good lineup. The other component that's fun is they're athletic. So they steal bases, and they steal bases at a high rate. So they have the second most stolen bases in baseball and the second highest stolen base percentage in baseball. They're stealing it at about 85%. And at home, Wrigley plays as a pitcher's park a lot of times. So the wind blows in. So at home, they steal twice as many bases, and on the road, they hit more homers.
I want to get back because you said something, and I just want to confirm to the audience you are not Kyle Tucker's agent of record. Is that correct?
I am not. I am not. But it should start probably with a five. Is what I.
So,
Sorry, did I say that out loud?
when you drop a Soto, that gives some people PTSD, especially Cubs fans.
Right.
Because are you suggesting that there is some sort of contract? Because Kyle Tucker, in theory, if the Cubs let him go, and we're going to talk about that next, with what is the pressure that they feel to re-sign him, either now, which I don't think is possible, or when free agency starts, or otherwise it becomes a rental. And by the way, the Astros have done great since trading Kyle Tucker, one of
Yeah.
those trades that works for both teams. But you're valuing Kyle Tucker in the Soto range. You just said a five. So you're saying $500 million dollars.
No, so what I'm saying is that like there's two separate conversations here. Um, I'm saying that he's very similar to the level of player that Juan Soto is. He's 2 years older, so that changes the contract constraints. What I am saying is he is absolutely a superior player to Vladimir Guerrero, and he got 500 million. So between 760 and 500, if I'm Kyle Tucker, I'm like, yeah, somewhere in there.
And you believe that being around the team, being around the clubhouse, is that really where the Ricketts family is? Is Tom, are they thinking about that for Kyle Tucker?
Um, I it'd be hard for me to imagine. I think I don't know. I don't have a sense for how like the chances that he'd come back, but I don't. I think look, for the most part, they did the Jason Hayward deal, and that did not work out. And that was in the prime of of his career, and when they were winning. This they gave Swanson the big deal. I wouldn't say that they've shown like an inclination towards, dipping into those giant contracts.
Well, what we're saying is when they do, it often doesn't work out, but there's a unique
Not
pressure
often.
here.
It's just the one gives him PTSD.
Well, we all have that. Every team has that, but you keep doing it because it's a funny thing that a fan base has where they think that their team's the only team that either lets free agents go or has bad contracts or dead money. All 30 front offices feel the same. But when you are the Cubs and you're having a year like this, you don't know where it'll end. Right now, they have, they're fighting with the Brewers for the division, but there is a good chance they can get to the LCS. Can they get past the Mets, Dodgers? Maybe. Phillies? Maybe, maybe. But the more they advance, the more pressure there is because they got the World Series in 16, but it turned out not to be the dynasty that I think Theo had hoped for. But if you have
Yeah.
Kyle for a year, you then have to go back because you don't want PCA as the centerpiece of your team. You need him as your second star, don't you think?
I still think we're at a place where you can't realistically say what Pete Crow-Armstrong is going to end up being. The whole thing in analyzing what he's done this year is, I mean, the Cubs traded for him. He had less than 30 professional at bats. So part of why this has been so unexpected is no baseline has been set. So I can't sit here and say what Pete Crow-Armstrong is going to look like. I'd use even your argument against you from the standpoint of maybe they let Tucker go. Please see the Astros. You know what I mean? So like so one player. Look, I think then now there's also the component of you're a signature franchise. You want to keep guys, and there's legacy. And sometimes you just want to get the player. And sometimes to get the player, there's a price. It's not, in today's world, it's we sit there and do it's good value at this, it's not good value at this. And then every once in a while, and I respect this, it's just we got to get this guy. So we're gonna and like that's what happened with the Mets. The Mets were like, we want this guy, we're getting this guy.
Well, that's bringing up the Soto name again. And you can't have many guys like that in the game because
No.
that's what causes contracts to be a little higher or a little less comfortable than they should be, and it causes problems more so on the pitching side. And side note, the Cubs, they're doing so well offensively, they could use some pitching. So
No
as they're
doubt.
looking at the deadline and they're thinking about, I don't want to go into a playoff series where I'm just looking at Imanaga and Boyd and saying, hey, there's my 1-2. I'll go up against anyone. I would assume that what you're seeing and feeling around the clubhouse is they've earned the right in their mind for the front office to go get them pitching help.
I think there's two things. I think if you're looking to make a deep run, I think you're right. They probably could use a dude. Um, Although I'm sure you could put together an argument that if you just went and added two more super stud bullpen arms, that's a method of going about and doing it. I think they could use a dude, but I would say as much of a concern is, look, you still have 75 games left, basically. Um, and your pitching depth. They don't have a ton of pitching depth. So they've sustained Steele for the year, Imanaga for 45 days. I don't think that they could sustain something else again. They don't have that level of depth. So it's kind of both. If you're trying to win the World Series, yeah, you'd love to go get your hands on a Chris Sale, but at the very least, I would say you need, like you've heard Mitch Keller's name, and like he's
Mhm.
solid, and they need depth just in case. Look, Stephen Boyd hasn't thrown over 80 innings. The last time he threw over 80 innings was 2019. So you've got to figure that, there's going to be a space where they're going to need to give him a little bit of a break, something along those lines. So I think it's twofold. You know what I'm saying? That they need a dude up front and they need some depth to shore up. in case somebody were to go down.
But as a front office, we also try to convince ourselves of certain things. Total confirmation bias time. I could go back and tell you, and you'd know the Dodgers won the World Series, and I bet you and I together would have a hard time naming who started each of the games. I remember Walker Buehler was on at the end, but
Yeah.
they had terrible starting pitching issues, and they were able to beat the Yankees in five. But when you're in it, in July, you're saying to yourself, what I said is, man, we need what you're calling a dude. We need somebody in
Right.
here to make that run. But that's why baseball is so great
Yeah.
because the Cubs have to do something. We agree, but it's going to be both. But I think we'd be fair to say, as a wait to see that we do on Nothing Personal, the Cubs are going to add pitching before July 31st. Is it safe to say that the clubhouse would be disappointed the night of the 31st if pitching is not added?
Yeah, I think probably. I mean, but I don't, yeah, I think that's what people expect. I think that's what people expect. I can't speak on behalf of the clubhouse. You're asking me to guess. That's my guess. But yeah, they're in a good spot to fortify their team. Your point on the Dodgers is a good one. The Dodgers in the playoffs last year did not have a single pitcher on their postseason roster that threw as many as 100 innings for them in
That's
the
a
regular
stat.
season. Now, Jack Flaherty threw more than that, but they did not have a guy who threw as many as 100 innings on their postseason roster, through 100 innings for them.
When we were doing postseason rosters and thinking about putting the regular season roster, then thinking about postseason, even if you're marginally in the race, you're thinking about it. But you're always trying to get at least two. This is the old days, but I guess now 100 innings, you're happy. We were trying to slot in who's going to get us 200, who's going to
Yeah,
get us 175. And
yeah.
now it's just become you can't find. It's like a 300 hitter. They're just hard to find these pitchers who give you depth. I want to talk about the state of the game a little bit, Boog. You've been broadcasting. Is it a full quarter of a century? Is it more now?
Yeah, well, I mean, my first year was 97, and I was like the pregame, postgame guy. And then it just kind of, yeah, went from there. So it's 25 years ish.
It's more. You're approaching 3 decades, a score and a half broadcasting games. If you've the game has changed a lot recently with what the commissioner's done. We can talk about the pitch clock. I think people have covered that. We can talk about the fact that they're trying to promote more speed. They're trying to get strikeouts down. They've number of times you can disengage the rubber. As you look back at the start of your broadcasting career, even going through our RO3 season to now, what is the number one? And this is a semi setup because I have an answer. What's the number one change, the biggest change that you've seen from sort of start of your career to now?
I don't think you could say that I think there are two main things. I think that um, when I first started, it was more, and they worked together. It was more of a contact based league, and you could have, sinker slider guy throwing 90 miles an hour. And so and the ball would be on the ground. The game could be done in 2 hours and 2 minutes. And then we reached a place from like 2014 to 2019 where you'd leave the ballpark and watch a 3 hour and 45-minute game that was 2-1 and nothing happened.
Every day.
Oh my gosh. And I, so I think that the pitch clock has changed things enormously, but I don't think you can. I think you also have to. I can't give you one thing. So I think the other part is the emphasis on velocity. Like part of why nobody is throwing 200 innings is that they're just asking them to step on the gas and go 95 the entire time. And then the way the hitters hit, you can't get hits off these guys. It's too hard. So the way you score is by slugging. And then people misunderstand what launch angle is and what the hitters are trying to do, but it's different now. And the pitchers are trying to strike people out. So it's velocity, lack of contact, and then thank goodness for the pitch clock.
So to me, it's time of game is the
Yeah.
biggest deal breaker. That changed after I was done and I was already in media. And I was thinking back to the number of times I'm pulling into my driveway from Pro Player or Marlins Park at 1 in the morning. Like the
Yeah.
games would just go forever, and then you had work after. And now, a 230 average. And velocity, though, Boog, we were looking for velocity always. You just couldn't find guys who could throw 100 miles per hour. We traded for one Lindstrom. We loved him. He had no secondary pitch, he had no command, but he could throw 100, so we wanted him. Now, if you can't throw 95, 97, you can't be in the bullpen. It
Right. But so
really is a huge change.
there's two things. Everybody always wanted velocity, but it's how do you go about getting it? So the first part is honestly back when you guys were in, in the early 2000s, the main belief was that you couldn't train for velocity. Now everybody knows you can train velocity. So that's a big shift. You can get a guy to throw harder. And then the other thing is they're trying to throw, like Dave Roberts has said to me, I want pitcher X to go out there and throw as hard as he can for as long as he can. So even though you were looking for velocity back then, they weren't using the velocity the way they use their velocity now.
But we agree that by doing that, and Dave Roberts is not alone, you are basically showing reckless indifference toward the health of your pitchers. Because, and I've said it on Nothing Personal and got criticized a little for it, where I said, yeah, if we have a guy who's going to be a free agent, we're going to throw him till his arm falls out. If we have a guy in this first year of a 5-year deal, we're going to protect his arm a little bit more. But this is what all 30 teams are doing. And yet, there's tons of money being spent. How do we avoid, like NBA is studying Achilles tears, MLB is studying Tommy Johns? How do we avoid
Right.
it? To me, it's so obvious why it's happening that it doesn't matter what we study.
Yeah, but the problem is you're going to look from the players, from the team standpoint, if you try to back off that, you're going to lose. And if from a player's standpoint, you're going to get hit and not make money. So like there's incentive to throwing harder, and that is you get people out. You get people out, you make more money.
So one of the things we talk about is how to change that. How do you get more contact? How do you get strikeouts down? How do you get pitchers healthier? And I've been standing on an island yelling at the top of my lungs towards Rob and Dan Helm saying, we have to change the arbitration criteria. We have to change how players get paid because people tend to act according to what will benefit themselves. It's like when a salesperson with a commission structure, they say, what can I sell that'll make me the most money? If you took dollars away from hitters for strikeouts, it would impact their two-strike swing, but we don't in arbitration. We talk about bulk a little bit in arbitration in terms of if there's an injury, you do get a discount, but it's not the way it could be if we really wanted to change it.
The only problem with that is it's penalizing to penalize. Like ultimately, you can strike out and win. And with slug comes strikeouts. So if you're going to tell them to not strike out as much, it may mean you're not going to hit for as much power. So I don't know that that quite works, penalizing them, or, for striking out because so many different components are linked to the performance. Like they're doing it this way for a reason now. You know what I mean? Like they are. People get confused about this, but like this is how you score. The league batting average is 245. It's too hard to go hit. So like they didn't just willy-nilly come up with this. There are a lot of really smart people. They are trying to score right now the most efficient way, and that nets strikeouts offensively.
Well, we've always been doing that, but you end up, with stolen bases is a great example. A lot of teams say we're not going to run ourselves into an out. It's just not worth it to us. It's why sacrifice bunts and moving the runners over, get them in, used to be something that Tony Perez and Andre Dawson would just sit there yelling at me during games. Get them over,
Right.
get them in. Now it's
Right.
just get on and wait to jog. But it works for some teams, doesn't work for others. It worked for Sammy Sosa. I saw something on X, Boog, a replay of Beckett's game five in the 2003 LCS when we were down 3-1 and the game that he had, which not enough people talk about. And I was looking at Sammy Sosa, and then I was seeing that he was finally welcomed back to Wrigley just recently. What was that like? Did you interact with him at all
Yeah, he
when
was
he
in the
was
booth
back?
with us.
I didn't
It was
see it. I'm
neat.
sorry.
No, people were so excited. I mean, look, whatever you want to say, he captured baseball. He made Wrigley a place to be. Um, Holy cow. He was one of the most famous people in the country for a few years and, a compelling figure with the hop and the kiss and all that stuff. And yeah, he was must see TV. So having him come back, I think everybody just felt good about it.
So is there a full detente now? Is he going to be a community leader? Is he going to come and will he dress and do some spring training stuff, or was
He
this
already
a
did.
so this was his first time in Wrigley and now he's back and everything's fine. So we're past the issue.
We're past the issue.
So the question is, does he want to be more of a full time? I can't imagine him wanting to be a coach. I speak to a lot of older players who struggle. The one guy, like the anti Don Mattingly, who loves the younger players, who can relate to them totally. He doesn't have any remorse about, oh, I didn't make this money and these schleppers are making that money. It's hard to find good coaches, good managers. And you guys went to my hometown, Milwaukee, to get your manager. And it
Yeah.
was quite a story this offseason. Craig Counsell, the Milwaukee guy, and we, of course, know him from the Marlins and his relationship to our visiting clubby. How is that when now the Brewers did better actually in year one, and now they're sort of chasing the Cubs again in year two? Is it
Yeah.
something that is thought about or it's way past?
Which part?
The fact that Counsell really went from Milwaukee to Chicago, he's totally embraced by Chicago. People in Milwaukee are over because the team's doing well, or is it sort of a thing where Counsell pays attention to the Brewers, or is it just past now?
I mean, Counts pays attention to the Brewers because they're good and they're in the division. I think that they will keep, last year and this year, that like they blew the pants off of them. I think I'll give it like that's a funny one where like this is a good example, and I'd like you to put like ownership hat on, but like he could still be the manager of the Brewers. They just chose not to pay him.
That's true, but what happens is sometimes managers ask he was a free agent, and sometimes you just can't compete with what another team's going to offer
But he
because
can. He could have competed. He just chose not to. Like he actually has the money to pay it.
you're talking about Mark Antonaccio in Milwaukee.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, so what we do is we have in our mind what we would want to pay a manager, and that we're just not
Right?
going to go above it, no matter what, no matter who it
Right. But he
is.
can pay it.
But everybody, I mean, the Cubs you could get paid more for what you do. I could get paid more for what I do. Our companies
Okay,
could
I
afford to
get
pay
it.
more.
But all I'm saying is like they get mad because he left and took more money. But like if they wanted to keep him, they could have kept him.
I think what happened, it's sort of like Soto. He gets booed at Yankee Stadium in May for 15 years. My
Right.
contention is that if he had signed with the Cubs, it would not have been this level of rancor. The
Yeah, I
fact that he
think you're
went
right.
Yankees Mets has caused it. The fact that it was Brewers Cubs, and don't forget in Milwaukee we've got a thing about Chicago. Like
Yeah,
we
no, I
always
know.
feel like we're inferior to them, even though we're not. So I think that was a bigger issue.
Yeah, I think that certainly plays in, no doubt.
So we have 1 minute left. I want to
What?
end that it's done. I don't want to keep you longer than I said
What
I
a
would.
gas bag I am. Sorry.
No, it's amazing. I want to finish with just because it'll make me smile and hopefully our audience. What's your number one memory from our 2003 World Series run?
Gosh, it's so hard because that's my favorite team ever. I feel so connect. I still talk to guys on that team. I mean, there's a part of it riding the bus to the ballpark, or riding the bus from the hotel. The team would take the bus in the playoffs,
Yes,
like
we
the whole
did.
team. It was weird. They wouldn't get there super early. That was like a Jeff Conine thing. So like the broadcaster bus, like the players were on it, and you'd have people jumping out in New York and giving us the finger, and then in Chicago, Mike Redmond's, we're going along Lakeshore, and Mike Redmond's talking about, the sea, she's a rolling boys, and there's so many different aspects. Um, I think I think waiting. One of my stories that I love to tell, one of my favorite stories is um, we didn't know who we were going to play. It was the first year that the All-Star game gave home field. So the American League had home field. Our series was 1 year or 1 day behind. So we're in Chicago. We were watching game 7 of the ALCS at a hotel. Eventually, Pedro starts to give it up. We get into a bus. We drive to the plane. They will not let us on the tarmac. So we're behind a gate because the game is not concluded and we do not have a place that we are going to. And we're literally sitting there on the bus listening to John Miller call it. And Aaron Boone hits the home run, and it literally is this. And it is gone, and the Yankees are going to the World Series, and the gate is opening, and John hasn't even finished his call, and we're driving onto the tarmac and getting on the plane to fly to New York.
Life's funny, Boog, because that is the story that I tell as well, and people do not believe that it's true. And now that you're saying it, it gives credibility because that is an exactly true story that Aaron Boone hit it. We had Kevin Millar on recently, and he was describing himself at first base watching the ball leave. And he said, I didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, the game was over. We thought we were going to the World Series. Everything's great. And then it's done. And he's looking at Wakefield, rest in peace, walking off the field. And I said, yeah, we were getting on the tarmac.
Yeah, that's right.
Boog, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. Good luck the rest of the way, and I will do this again.
Would love to. Thanks, David.
TV voice for the Chicago Cubs. That's Boog Sciambi.